When a mother loses a child, it feels as if the whole world collapses. But Carlo Acutis' mother shows us something extraordinary about facing the deepest pain a human being can endure. She didn't just survive the loss, she turned it into a wellspring of unshakable faith. Imagine, for a moment, living the worst nightmare any parent could face, and yet finding divine purpose in that very tragedy. That's exactly what she did, drawing inspiration from the book of Job in the Bible. Like Job, she didn't question God with bitterness but embraced the mystery of His will. Her spirituality became a guiding light for thousands around the world. She discovered that even in the sharpest pain, God was present, shaping something far greater than she could ever have imagined. This isn't just a testimony, it's a masterclass in living faith authentically. That's why, in this video, we will hear a moving account from Carlo Acutis' mother about his body displayed in Assisi, along with the depth of faith and devotion of this young saint who continues to inspire thousands of believers around the world. To join in this testimony, write in the comments, "Lord, increase my faith like Carlo's." A simple gesture that opens the heart to God's grace. Now, come along with me and discover what Carlo's life, so brief yet so profound, still has to teach us today. What's most striking in her testimony is the spiritual maturity with which she faced it all. She didn't pretend everything was fine, but she chose, consciously, to see God's hand at work through the suffering. In her daily prayers, she began to understand that Carlo wasn't just her son, he had a mission on this earth. Her words carry the wisdom of the saints. I recognize that this sacrifice is part of God's plan. Imagine the strength required to say that. It's as if she tapped into a spiritual knowledge few people ever reach. In church gatherings, her testimony moves the hearts of young Christians struggling with their own battles. She turned her personal grief into a powerful ministry of hope. When she attends worship, her very presence radiates a peace that can only come from someone who truly knows Jesus Christ intimately. The way she shares her journey within the church is nothing short of transformative. In Bible studies, she often speaks about how the book of Job became her constant companion during the hardest times. It isn't just theological theory, it's the living experience of the gospel. She explains how her devotional times changed completely after Carlo's passing, becoming moments of deep communion with the divine. Whenever she joins Sunday sermons, she offers a perspective that reveals how worship sustains us through life's storms. The praise that flows from her lips carries a different weight. It is the song of someone who has walked through the valley of the shadow of death and still found light. When she speaks of Christianity, it's not doctrine alone, it's the living witness of someone who has tasted the transforming power of faith in the midst of chaos. Her story prepares us to understand something even deeper, how Carlo himself faced his own journey. Life has turns no one can predict. One day Carlo was building websites about Eucharistic miracles. The next he was battling a sudden, aggressive leukemia that changed everything. But here's what few people know. From the very first diagnosis, this 15-year-old showed a spiritual maturity that left even his doctors astonished. While most teenagers would have been overwhelmed with fear, Carlo saw his illness as an opportunity to serve. His prayers weren't desperate pleas for healing, they were deliberate offerings of his suffering. He said clearly, "I offer everything for the Church, for the Pope, and for eternal life." Can you imagine the depth of faith it takes to turn pain into a voluntary sacrifice? In the Bible studies he attended, Carlo always radiated this unusual connection with the divine. His faith wasn't just a Sunday routine, it was a way of life that shone brightest in his final moments. What amazed doctors and nurses who cared for Carlo was the supernatural calm he carried in the face of suffering. While adult patients often fell into despair, this young Christian radiated a peace that seemed to come from another world. During chemotherapy sessions, he would turn his hospital room into a small chapel, praying and reading devotionals even while hooked up to machines. His mother recalls that Carlo seemed to have an early awareness he would not live long, yet this did not sadden him, it filled him with purpose. In the church services he could attend before being hospitalized, his worship was different, more intense, as though every hymn was his last chance to praise. He spoke of Jesus Christ with an intimacy that touched even non-believers. His spirituality wasn't childlike or naive, It was as profound as that of the great saints of history. While other young people complained about small inconveniences, Carlo offered up great sufferings with joy. In his final days, something extraordinary seemed to happen in his hospital room. Nurses described an atmosphere they could only call sacred, something they couldn't explain. His last prayers weren't cries of despair but acts of total surrender to God's will. He even said that his sufferings were small compared to what Jesus endured on the cross, a perspective that left those around him speechless. Experienced oncologists admitted they had never seen anything like it. Carlo turned his passing into a true celebration of faith, showing that even death can be lived as an act of authentic Christianity. In his last silent sermons, because by then he spoke little, he kept interceding for others. His concern wasn't for himself, but for the salvation of the souls around him. And when he finally departed, he left behind an example that continues to echo far beyond his short earthly life, preparing the way for something even more mysterious. While most people struggle against suffering, Carlo Acutis taught a lesson few ever learn in a lifetime: how to turn pain into an offering. His serenity wasn't passivity or resignation, it was a deliberate choice to live each moment of agony as an act of faith. Picture a 15-year-old boy, connected to tubes and machines, more concerned about the nurse's well-being than his own discomfort. In his daily hospital prayers, Carlo didn't ask for relief for himself, but blessings for other patients. His parents recall how he would even ask about children in other rooms, wanting to know if they needed anything. This wasn't forced or staged, it flowed naturally from his deep spirituality. Long before his illness, during Bible studies, Carlo already revealed this rare capacity to think first of others. His faith was lived from the inside out, expressed in tangible acts of love for those around him. What struck doctors and visitors most was the genuine joy Carlo carried even in his most painful moments. It wasn't denial of reality or forced optimism, it was unshakable trust in God's goodness. When members of the church visited, he would turn the hospital room into a true sanctuary of worship. His testimonies of faith in those final days touched hearts more deeply than many sermons ever could. He spoke of Jesus Christ with shining eyes, even when his body was racked with pain. During his bedside devotions, Carlo radiated a peace that spread to everyone present. Nurses who weren't religious began asking questions about his faith, curious about the source of such calm. His very presence transformed an atmosphere of death into a place of hope. The silent praise that rose from his heart spoke louder than words. The way Carlo embraced each day of suffering as a chance for spiritual growth challenges us to the core. While young Christians his age complained about school tests or everyday teenage frustrations, he offered up acute leukemia as a willing sacrifice. In the worship services he attended before his final hospitalization, his adoration carried a different weight, as if every moment was holy. This wasn't Christianity in theory, it was faith lived at its most extreme. Carlo turned his deathbed into a pulpit, teaching what it means to live the gospel authentically. His mother recalls him saying, "My sufferings are small compared to those of Jesus." That perspective makes us stop and ask, how are we facing our own daily struggles? His attitude prepared the way for something even more extraordinary that would unfold after his passing. After Carlo's death, remarkable events began happening across the world. These weren't mere coincidences or the imaginings of grieving hearts, they were occurrences that defied rational explanation. The first great surprise came when a Brazilian child with terminal cancer was completely healed after the family prayed for Carlo's intercession. The doctors, skeptics by nature, were speechless at the scans showing the tumor had vanished. But that was only the beginning. Soon after, an Italian woman who had spent years unable to conceive became pregnant with twins after visiting Carlo's tomb and praying with unshakable faith. These were not isolated events. Reports started arriving from all over the world. During Sunday services, pastors and priests began hearing astonishing testimonies from believers who experienced miracles after calling on the young man's intercession. His spirituality seemed to have transcended death itself, continuing to act in mysterious ways. Carlo's mother began receiving signs she at first dismissed as the consolations of a grieving mind. But the dreams were too specific, too detailed to be imagination. In one, Carlo appeared dressed in white, radiant with joy, clearly saying, "Mom, I'm going to be beatified." At the time, beatification seemed impossible. Carlo had only recently died, and the process usually takes decades. Yet the dream was so vivid, so real, that she began writing down every detail. Months later, another prophetic dream came, Carlo announcing she would have twins. For a woman past the usual age for pregnancy, it seemed impossible. But during her daily devotionals, she felt an unexplainable certainty that these visions were not fantasy. Her faith, already strengthened by her son's witness, grew even deeper. In church gatherings, she began sharing these experiences with young Christians, who listened in awe to the spiritual depth of these signs. What happened next left even the most skeptical stunned. Every prophecy from those dreams came true exactly as foretold. Carlo's beatification was approved in record time by the Catholic Church, something almost unheard of in modern history. And yes, his mother conceived twins at the age of 44, in a pregnancy doctors themselves called miraculous. But the signs didn't stop there. During Bible studies around the world, people began reporting supernatural experiences after praying to Carlo. A young American girl regained her sight, an elderly Frenchman was healed from severe heart disease, an African family was lifted out of extreme poverty after years of prayer. Testimonies poured in from every continent, forming a global network of faith linked through the intercession of a teenage Italian. In Sunday sermons, priests and pastors began citing Carlo as proof that God can use anyone, regardless of age, to change lives. Religion was gaining a new model of youthful holiness, modern, digital, and yet deeply rooted in the gospel. These signs were only the prelude to an even more astonishing discovery about his physical body. When Carlo's remains were examined years after his passing, doctors and scientists encountered something that defied all known laws of decomposition. His body was intact, not partially preserved, but completely whole, as if he had been buried the day before. This phenomenon, known in religious tradition as incorruptibility, is exceedingly rare and always draws great scientific curiosity. What made Carlo's case even more extraordinary was the timing. The discovery came precisely as a worldwide movement of young Christians was seeking authentic models of faith. In modern Bible studies, many teenagers struggled to connect with ancient saints. Carlo became a bridge between timeless spirituality and the digital age. His incorrupt body wasn't just a physical wonder, but a powerful sign for a generation that grew up questioning miracles. In devotional gatherings across the globe, young people suddenly had a tangible example of how God reveals His glory through ordinary lives. The impact of discovering Carlo's incorrupt body echoed through the global church with extraordinary force. Bishops and cardinals who had once been cautious about his cause for beatification were deeply moved by such undeniable evidence. In Sunday worship, pastors began pointing to Carlo as living proof that God still works miracles today. This was not blind faith. It was physical evidence that could be scientifically examined. For his mother, seeing her son's preserved body was a powerful confirmation of all the signs she had received through dreams and prayer. To her, it was not simply a scientific curiosity, but a clear divine message. Carlo had a mission that would continue beyond his death. Worship in his memory took on an entirely new dimension, as people could now witness with their own eyes the physical manifestation of holiness. Testimonies of faith from pilgrims who visited multiplied rapidly, igniting a wave of spiritual renewal, especially among the young. The public display of Carlo's body in Assisi transformed the city into a new center of pilgrimage for youth from every corner of the world. Unlike other saints whose relics are venerated, Carlo represented something unique, a teenager of the 21st century who managed to combine technology, modern life, and holiness in a truly authentic way. During their visits, young Christians shared stories of deep conversion as they stood before someone from their own generation who had lived the faith so radically. Prayers before his incorrupt body carried a special intensity, as if they were speaking to a close friend who understood their struggles and dreams. The gospel gained fresh life when told through Carlo's story. It no longer felt like a distant message from ancient times but a present, accessible reality. In today's sermons, priests and pastors use his life as proof that one can live authentic spirituality without abandoning modernity. Through Carlo, religion speaks directly to the digital generation, preparing hearts to grasp his true spiritual mission. Carlo Acutis' mission goes far beyond being remembered as another young saint. He came to revolutionize how we understand the centrality of the Eucharist in modern Christian life. While many believers treat communion as a routine Sunday ritual, Carlo awakens us to the extraordinary mystery that unfolds at every Massachusetts. His passion for Eucharistic miracles was not the hobby of a religious teenager. It was a divine mission to remind the world that Jesus Christ is physically present in the sacrament. In his Bible studies, he discovered hundreds of documented cases where the host transformed into real human flesh and blood, phenomena even investigated by modern science. Imagine a 15-year-old devoting hours of his free time to cataloging proof of Christ's real presence in the Eucharist. His spirituality was profoundly sacramental. He knew that every Mass was not just a service, but a true encounter with the divine. Through his gift for technology, Carlo created a digital encyclopedia of these miracles, making accessible to all what had once been locked away in academic circles. What makes Carlo's mission even more relevant is his ability to bridge ancient traditions with the digital language of our time. In church gatherings, he wasn't just a well-behaved young Christian. He was a natural evangelizer who used technology to amplify the gospel. His devotion to the Blessed Sacrament carried a fire that even seasoned believers noticed. He turned the rosary, often seen as an old practice, into a living tool of connection with Mary, showing how timeless prayers can come alive when prayed with authenticity. In his daily devotion, Carlo discovered that frequent sacramental life, regular confession, mindful communion, Eucharistic adoration, was the fuel behind his contagious joy. His faith was never a burden or an obligation, but a source of strength and purpose. For young Christians who often view the sacraments as dull formalities, Carlo showed that these encounters with God can be nothing short of revolutionary. The genius of Carlo's mission lay in recognizing that our generation needs concrete evidence to sustain faith in a skeptical world. His websites on Eucharistic miracles weren't just collections of religious information, they were powerful tools of evangelization that reached even the doubtful. In praise gatherings, his radiant joy flowed from one clear conviction. He knew Jesus was present in the Eucharist. He didn't merely believe. That certainty turned every Mass into an act of authentic worship. He taught his peers that confession is not humiliation but freedom, that communion is not routine but a real encounter, that the rosary is not empty repetition but deep meditation on the mysteries of salvation. His way of living the sacraments was reverent yet approachable, serious yet joyful. Through his witness, Carlo prepared us to see something deeper about how we, too, should live our spirituality in today's world. Perhaps the most revolutionary message Carlo Acutis left us is summed up in one phrase that should be engraved in every Christian heart: everyone is born an original, not a copy. This wasn't a teenager's slogan. It was profound theology about individuality within faith. While our culture pressures us to imitate influencers, celebrities, and passing ideals, Carlo reminds us that God created us unique, with an unrepeatable purpose. His spirituality carried this radical authenticity. He never tried to mimic other saints but discovered his own way of living Christianity. In Bible study, he often emphasized that each person has a unique call to holiness. His faith wasn't uniform or standardized. It was shaped by the Spirit's action in his own life. For young Christians who feel pressed into ready-made molds of religion, Carlo embodies the freedom to be truly holy by being truly yourself. The most challenging part of Carlo's message is his radical call to live with eternity in view, not appearances. In a world obsessed with likes, followers, and validation, he forces us to ask hard questions. Are we living to impress people or to please God? In his daily prayers, Carlo nurtured an eternal perspective that freed him from the chains of human opinion. His presence in church was never a social performance but true worship of Jesus Christ. He grasped something few teenagers do: this earthly life is brief compared to the eternity awaiting us. That awareness freed him from the usual anxieties of youth, not because he ignored reality, but because his priorities were right. Today, preachers point to his life as proof that one can be socially relevant without being enslaved by trends. His joy did not rest on circumstances, but on his unshakable identity in Christ. Carlo's spiritual brilliance was his ability to hold together modernity and tradition, technology and contemplation, youthful energy and mature faith. His insistence on regular confession sounded radical in a time when many had set the sacrament aside. In his visits before the Blessed Sacrament, he discovered that Eucharistic adoration was the secret to keeping his soul centered amid the noise of the digital age. His love for the Eucharist wasn't a nostalgic relic of old religion, it was a fresh discovery of Christ's real presence. For a generation hungry for authenticity, Carlo revealed that the most real encounter is found in mindful, reverent communion. His practice of the Rosary was both ancient and modern, a deep meditation rivaling any contemporary mindfulness technique. Through his intense sacramental life, Carlo teaches us that the Church's traditional paths are not obstacles to modernity but safe bridges into a spirituality that transforms both the individual and society. His voice still echoes, urging us to discover our own original way to holiness. Carlo's journey also reveals the hidden power of simplicity in a world that often confuses greatness with noise and recognition. He never sought fame or applause, yet his quiet acts of faith now echo across continents. Whether helping a classmate with homework, sharing laughter with friends, or spending silent hours in prayer, each gesture carried a depth that spoke louder than any sermon. His life reminds us that sanctity is not built on extraordinary stages, but in the humble consistency of choosing love daily. For those who believe their faith is too small to matter, Carlo proves that even the smallest seeds can grow into forests of transformation. Another striking aspect of his witness is how he united the sacred and the ordinary without contradiction. He could play video games, enjoy technology, and yet still treat the Eucharist as the center of his existence. To him, holiness was not about rejecting modern life, but about filling it with purpose and presence. This integration is what makes his example so magnetic for today's generation. He shows that living authentically with God doesn't mean stepping out of the world, but living within it with new eyes. Carlo's legacy offers a roadmap for anyone who longs to live their faith without abandoning the rhythm of daily life. Perhaps the greatest lesson Carlo leaves us is that faith does not make us distant, it makes us more deeply human. His joy, his kindness, his creativity, and his curiosity all flowed naturally from his relationship with God. He did not carry faith as a burden but as a gift that gave meaning to everything else. When people encountered him, they felt drawn not to religion as a system, but to a God who is alive and close. In this way, Carlo continues to teach us that holiness is not about perfection but about letting divine love shine through ordinary lives.